Thank you for having me, and thank you for the nice introduction, Alex. So I'm here to talk about accelerating decisions with third-party data in financial services and considerations that you should take before acquiring third-party data. So what you'll hear is how third-party data and expertise can optimize financial services operations, best practices in location enabling strategies for data analytics, considerations around data enrichment requirements, and financial service specific use cases where location data informs data-driven decisions. So exploring the need for trusted data. So we've done some surveys across the industry and made some determinations that almost all companies want to make business decisions based on the data that they have, but very few trust the data. So 83% of CEOs want their data organization to be more data-driven. Digital transformation investments will top $6.8 trillion globally in 2023. Global infrastructure spending is expected to reach $200 billion. And 68% of Fortune 1000 businesses now have CDOs, which is up 6 times from the last decade. So companies out there are looking to action data, and they understand the value in doing so. 73% of the same folks surveyed say that a lack of technology and services to facilitate data integration is creating challenges for their teams. 82% say that data quality concerns represent a barrier to their digital transformation projects. 80% find it challenging to ensure that data is enriched at scale. So clearly recognition that they want to action these data assets, but don't have the internal facilities set up to do so. So data integrity is a journey. Every journey to data integrity is unique and driven by business initiatives. Market trends are accelerating the need for data integrity, and enrichment is a critical component of data integrity in the financial services vertical. So what do we mean by enrichment? Enrichment is taking your internal data assets, cleansing them, standardizing them, making sure that they are actionable and reliable data assets, and then taking third-party attribution and appending them to those data assets. So think about like a customer record. You can append things like demographics and business information to give you broader insights into specifically who your customers are, which can help you take further action with those customers. So selecting your data partner, what you should be looking for. First is all data assets are not created equally. So data transparency, what does data transparency mean? So it's understanding specifically what is in the data sets that you're purchasing. So you think about data sets like points of interest or demographics, where are they sourced from? What is the underlying attribution? Specifically, what are your objectives from that data? So what is the desired outcome that you're trying to get? Data sets, can be sort of comparable. They're unlike sort of bespoke projects that you would build out of software, right? Data comes off the shelf in many cases, specific to third-party data sets. So think about it in like a packaged food analogy, right? When you go to the grocery store, you want to make sure when you're pulling the box off the shelf that you're reading the underlying ingredients to make sure that you're getting the most nutritious and viable food off the shelf, which works well for data. You want to make sure that it has full attribution. You want to make sure that it has metadata, documentation, support. You want to understand the sources where it came from. Is this crowdsourced? Is it web scraped? Does it come from an authoritative source? You also want to make sure that you're doing business with a company with commitment to quality. So again, is it a supported data set? Does it have good documentation? Is it updated? You want the data to be consistent and user-friendly. So from release to release, you want to make sure that the schema is consistent. You want to make sure that it's easy for a business user to understand, right? It shouldn't be something that requires a high degree of specialty to glean basic insights from. You want it to be straightforward and timely. So again, you want kind of clear documentation. You want good metadata. You want to understand the methodology used to create the data set, where the sources are coming from, so you can build trust, credibility, and reliance in that data set. And you want it to be timely, so you want it to come with updates, because data is a specific kind of asset that gets stale relatively frequently, right? So many suppliers update data as frequently as monthly, some even weekly. So you want to look for update frequency as one of the key elements when you're selecting third-party data and third-party data suppliers, to make sure that you're getting something that's going to be really actionable. Flexible delivery options is another thing to consider. So is it a bulk data set? Is it delivered through an API? Do I have the ability to kind of select the specific geographies that I get? Is it a global data set, only countrywide coverage? So, kind of understanding delivery options also will help you optimize your data purchase and get the most out of the data that you purchase, that you move forward with. And finally, end-to-end data integrity is a critical part of actioning any third-party data. As I had referred to prior, you want to make sure that your data is cleaned, deduped, and ready to have third-party attribution appended, so you can make sure that you're working with the most reliable data possible. So transparency is the data fit for your purpose. So the first thing you really want to make sure you're doing before making a data purchase is really understand your intended business objective. So you want to make a determination, really, what do I want to get out of this? And that will drive the supporting attribution that you need. So in the first image, you can see it's just an address point, but without surrounding context, without surrounding attribution, it's very difficult to understand if that's a building centroid. Is it a parcel centroid? Is it street interpolated centroid? Like, what does that point really represent? And then the second image shows how attaching supporting attribution to that point gives you a full picture. So you can see, based on the building outline, that this is a building centroid. The parcels also depicted there. We have an identified relationship between the three using a unique identifier. We give you a confidence of the geocoding accuracy there. So you can see that this supporting attribution all of a sudden takes this one standalone point and makes it something that you can action. It makes it more reliable because of the additional context that is provided. So precisely, we have the 5 C's as part of our engineering practice, and these are things that we feel very strongly should be included in any data consideration. So when you're choosing the right data set for your project or your business process, you want to first consider coverage. So is it global coverage? Is it only a specific state? Is it only a specific county? So by understanding your business objective, you'll know how to select the appropriate coverage. And it's important when comparing disparate data sets to compare that coverage as well, to make sure that the selection you make is going to best fit your needs. Second is completeness. So that's things like fill rates, record counts. So you want to make sure that, again, the data set you're going to work with to make these critical business decisions is as robust as possible. Third is correctness. And you can vet correctness by understanding ground truth and also by comparing to other third-party data sources, right? To make sure that you get some agreement there, because there's different sorts of techniques used to build data sets. Some vendors do screen scraping, which can potentially be less reliable in some circumstances, because you're relying on whatever's out, published on the internet to be the source of truth, which most of us know is not always the case, right? Sometimes sites are out of date. Sometimes things are put up, on the web before they're realizing ground truth. So you want to make sure that the vendor you're working with works with authoritative sources to provide that correctness. So you have, again, a data set that you can rely on. Fourth is currency, so freshness. So you want to make sure that there's an update schedule for whatever data that you're going to work with. You want to understand that you're working with kind of the latest and greatest data, and you're not making decisions based on census data that, is 3 years old, or, or is 10 years old if they're, or 13 years old rather, if they're just using the 2013 census. So there's a lot of volatilities specifically in business data and human movement data post-COVID. So you want to make sure that the currency of the data you're working with is as close to present day as possible. And then lastly is consistency. So, and that's consistency from release to release, as well as consistency from geography to geography. So do you have a consistent schema for the US and Poland or Nigeria? You want to make sure that if a company is offering a global product, that they have consistent fill rates, consistent header, consistent data schema across country, and that allows for interoperability. Now, you're going to have to obviously go in with the notion that data collection is not equal considering the geography. Most companies you work with, I would hazard to say all companies that you work with and explore will have the best data, the most comprehensive data sets for North America and Western Europe, and a few other areas across the globe, whereas they may struggle, particularly in Africa, India, and certain parts of Asia, because the data isn't collected by authoritative sources in the same way in those geographies. So regardless of kind of completeness, the global product should still have consistency in schema and layout to make them easy to work with. So ways to ensure that the data you're working with is interoperable is having a unique identifier that binds all of the data sets. So in this example, you can see parcel boundaries, you can see building footprints, you can see property attribution listed, so elements of the buildings, and points of interest in the event that these are businesses, all tied together by a specific address point with a unique identifier. So that allows these data sets to be interoperable and merged in a non-spatial capacity, which makes them more user-friendly, and you require less GIS expertise. Business users can manipulate data sets that have this unique identifier structure. So what your data vendor should do, and what we do at Precisely, is try and make complex problems more straightforward. So here you can see address elements, and it turns out that even though the local post is the authoritative resource for address elements, all of the elements that make up an address actually come from disparate authorities. So the street number and the street name come from the developers and the local addressing authority. So the assessor's office with the parcel and whoever builds a development. The city section obviously comes from the administrative authority, the government, and then the postcode section comes from the postal authority. So what you should look for in a vendor is someone that can merge these disparate elements, relate them, standardize them, and validate them. So make sure that these relatively complex data elements that are all merged become more straightforward for you to work with, because at the end of the day, you don't want to have to do a bunch of prep work to make data fit for use. You want data that's curated and ready to go out of the gate. So methods of data consumption, things to think about. The way that you purchase your data really depends on how you're trying to solve a problem. So for data science applications that are using AI and ML, you want to pre-score every location. Having bulk volume data is key, because you want to do a lot of kind of complex upfront processing to derive insights based on the algorithms that you're training. And particularly in AI and ML, which is kind of emerging and all over the news these days, the more data you can throw at those, even similar data sets from different vendors, the more viable your outcome will be. The smarter the machine learning will become, and the better insights it will provide. So again, this is typically done in big batch with distributed compute in private or public cloud. So bulk data sets are optimal for those types of applications. or conversely, web applications where you're doing single property ingestion, or just looking up a single address and you want to, or a single customer profile, and you want to understand what kind of attribution relates to that customer. You can go the pre-processing bulk route, but alternately, you could leverage APIs, which presumably in many instances can offer kind of a lower cost to answer threshold. So for those single requests, you'd want to investigate vendors that have cloud APIs, or a vendor-hosted application, a vendor-hosted platform that allows for transactional pricing. So better data from better decisions. They're kind of the gateways. So there's integrate, which is basically taking all of your disparate internal data from all of the siloed systems that you have and getting them to a single data lake. So then you can do the verification process, which would be to kind of standardize, validate, and dedupe those records. Then specifically for location-based context problems, you would want to geocode those. So that's where the locate step comes in, which would also allow for map display, heat mapping, visualization, those sorts of things. And then enrich is really where the third-party data comes in. So that's taking those clean records with location appended and appending third-party data to them. So again, elements like demographics or points of interest. So what kind of business is this? What kind of customer is this? Where are they located? How many people like them are in the surrounding area for marketing outreach, that sort of thing. And then lastly, engage, that's where kind of the marketing teams come in, and you determine how to best reach these new cleansed and enriched customer records. So in terms of the kinds of use cases that we're seeing in financial services being addressed with data, so we have the mortgage use case where you want to understand what neighborhood is the house in, because that's a value driver. What are the school districts, because that's also a value driver and part of the underwriting value process. You want to make sure that you're mitigating your risk underwriting the mortgage. Points of interest, so what kind of businesses are there? Is this kind of a safe neighborhood, or is there a chemical plant there that could impact the value of the home? Risks, so things like fire, flood, weather, which with climate change are ever more poignant in terms of making those business decisions. And then last would be the location ID or lat long that allows you to tie all of those elements together. From credit cards, you want to understand business locations, customer demographics, what the weather is, because that could impact customer behavior, right? Are they not going to go to a store because of a heat wave, those sorts of things. And then global boundaries, which help you do transaction validation, same with the business location information. So a lot of times in payment records that you receive, because of the nature of the way that the credit card machine was established at the business, it might not give you a complete business profile information. So this allows you to do some entity resolution, so you can make sure, better understand the businesses that you're working with, and, kind of identify fraud, and also, kind of better identify businesses where you have good traction, so you can invest in outreach to those specific businesses. Global boundaries, again, for doing, kind of transaction tie-outs, just because the record says that the transaction occurred in New York State. When you do a reverse geocode based on the transaction, is that business actually in Mexico? Is is the business actually where they say they are? And that's another element of fraud detection. And then last, mobile data. So mobile trace data, human movement. So you want to understand specifically where your customers are going, what kinds of businesses they're doing business with, so you can make next best offers, that sort of thing. ESG, points of interest, risk data, property attributions, and property attributes, and again, that mobile data, so you can make a determination how the global business landscape is changing, so you can identify what steps you need to take to ensure that your business network is safe and, you know, as kind of hardened as possible from things like climate risk and, again, mass exodus during COVID, right? You know, where there's big human movement out of urban downtown areas and into more rural areas. So definitely good to consider. In terms of branch optimization, a lot of those same elements hold true. So you want to understand address fabric, which would be, again, the address density around specific locations. Is this, you know, an underserved or overserved location based on both the population and the business locations that are around? So both the competitive and complementary business landscape there. The human movement data, again, plays a big part in that, right? So where are people moving? Where are people spending money during the daytime? Demographics with combination of the human movement data, that mobile data helps you understand what kind of folks these are that are transacting, again, which helps marketing efforts. Travel time, travel distance, so you want to get a sense of what the catchment area is around a specific location. So again, you can make a determination if that community is underserved or overserved. And then bank deposit information also helps you understand what the potential customer base is around that area. So for cross-sell and upsell, you want to understand what the demographics are attached to your transaction records, what the property attribution is, and again, that mobile trace, so you can build a stronger customer profile and make the best determination as to what their next best offer would be. From an investment banking perspective, we see lots of points of interest, risk, and demographics data in terms of understanding the global business landscape and which businesses make the most sense to invest in and which make the most sense to divest from based on expansion and contraction, which can be due to risk, due to, you know, kind of obsolescence of a specific type of business due to cultural change. So there's a number of factors in there that you can glean by enriching transaction information with third-party data, and also having a sense of what the total global landscape is. Commercial lending, again, back to geocoding, and risk and property attribution, so you can understand how solvent a business may be based on some of those external factors, which will influence any, you know, kind of lending decisions. And then lastly, transaction monitoring, right? So that entity resolution. So you want to understand the administrative boundaries, the location of where the transactions are coming from, and the business locations, the points of interest, so you can validate that the transactions are coming from known trusted businesses and that they are where they say they are, to avoid any kind of regulatory issues. So I'll open it up to questions at this point.